We're being joined again tonight by a lawyer and also a FIFA licensed legal representative. Ibrahim Abiola joins us again from Enugu State. Ibrahim, thank you so much. Good to see you again. This matter doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon. You've heard from Ademola Lookman, who's come back to Atalanta waiting for possible or inevitable sanctions. You've also heard from Alexander Isak, who has made it clear that promises were made and broken, and he still does not look as if he has any intention for playing for Newcastle United again. Now, back to this question I asked you yesterday. Legally, what is the status of the clubs and the players? Are the players allowed to go on strike, considering the fact that they have existing contracts? Can the clubs also sanction them for breach of contract?
Thank you very much for having me on the show once again today. First of all, let's start with this. I would mention that FIFA regulation on the transfer of players, Article 13, obviously mentions that players must respect their contract. You see that a contract between a professional and a club may only be terminated upon expiry of the term of the contract or by mutual agreement. So is it when a player decides to go on strike, the player is expressly breaching the terms of the agreement? We've seen a number of players do this in the past, and we've seen them face sanctions from the clubs. Recently, we had Carlos Tevez refusing to come on for Man City in the game against Bayern, and the club had an investigation, and the club was forced to fine the player after taking all legal measures. So for any player who decides to go on strike due to a promise or the other that is not written in his contract, is actually going against the terms of the law, because you do not go on strike while trying to force your club to sell you or take you out on transfer. It means you are trying to induce the club into breaching that contract, because if the club decides to withhold your salary during that period for a period of 2 months, you can see the club has just cause, so you would want to terminate the contract. So for players, it is illegal for you to go on strike. What players are meant to do is get their agent to get the club to sit down and have a proper conversation on how the transfer should go. So players that go on strike are not respecting their contracts and breaching the FIFA regulations on that.
So the question I asked you again yesterday was, who do we blame for this state of affairs whereby the club and the player are locked in some kind of impasse right now? Is it the player's legal representative or manager who sat there and pretty much agreed to a contract that did not give their clients a possible exit? Or is it the club for trying to enforce a contract to the letter instead of having a humane face and trying to find, an amicable solution? Who do we blame for this current situation now?
Okay, for the players, I mentioned this, they have to understand something. At the point where you're entering a contract with a club, you are the love of the club. So the club will make promises and do a lot of things. What you need to do is make sure that these promises are written down in your contract. Because at some point in time, the club will fall in love with other players, and at that point, you would want to move. But if you do not have the proper conditions in your contract to allow you to move easily, then it becomes a dicey situation like we've seen Ademola Lookman and Isak. Because Isak is as mentioned, that they have a verbal agreement with the club that he will be allowed to leave. For Lookman, it's also dicey because the club mentioned that the agreement is based on the fact that he will live outside Italy. So this now becomes a very big issue, because proving it is hard. Because for you to prove a verbal agreement, you have to show conduct from the club, and the conducts are very, very hard to show. For example, if you had an email sent to the club and mentioned that as discussed orally, so a CAS has held in recent cases that this shows that there's a verbal agreement. But at the moment, the players are holding a verbal agreement, and they are to be blamed with their representatives, because they are relying on the contract that is generally unenforceable on its own without the existence of other elements. So for the players, they take much of the blame. Well, for the clubs are meant to do business. So, and you see a club promise a player a lot of things, but when it comes to doing business, the club becomes selfish. So the clubs are protecting themselves. The players need to ensure that they protect themselves adequately also, and ensure they have enough terms to allow them to include these verbal agreements into the contract, and they'll be able to live on their own terms.
Okay. So basically, lawyer, you're saying that, a gentleman's agreement is not binding.
Not enforceable.
Is not enforceable. But we see a lot of times when players say that, we had a gentleman agreement and they expect the clubs to honor it. But I wanted to ask you about the hypocrisy of the game, the hypocrisy of football. I posted this on my X page, was it yesterday? That, look at the Rasmus Højlund situation. He's got 3 years left on his contract.
And the club
Manchester United are forcing him out right now. and nobody's criticizing the football club. But here's, you know, Alexander Isak,
Lookman,
who's got 3 years on his contract. Lookman has got 2 years, and they also want to leave, and they are being painted as villains. I don't know what you make of that. How do you balance that?
First of all, let me mention that the gentleman in football is the player, not the club. Clubs are not gentlemen. Clubs are very, very selfish when it comes to contracts with players. So players need to understand the fact that no matter how loving and how suiting you are with the club is not a gentleman, and you should have your contract in place. So for players like Ojlund, there is this disparity between the protection for players and the protection for clubs. You could mention the fact that FIFA tries as possible to protect the players, but for the club have a wide range of things to hide under, because for clubs they would mention the fact that performance based, the players is being pushed to the reserves or being pushed to train alone. Because to an extent, the players would also have cause to sue the clubs at FIFA or at CAS to show that they are being forced out of the club illegally or unethically. But however, it's a very, very dicey one for you to prove, because the club can easily bring out performance metrics to show that you are not worthy of entering the first team at the moment. So it's a very corny situation, and the players need to ensure they have enough representation to show that the club are acting illegally. And this stems from the fact that there should be an ongoing conversation with the club regarding their performance. So you'll be able to show that the club has not shown the reason why we are frozen out of the squad.
Okay. Ibrahim Abiola, lawyer and also FIFA recognized legal representative, thank you again for joining us tonight and helping us break down this particular issue. We'll be reaching out to you in future, but thank you so much, Ibrahim, for joining us.